We're in the middle of a once-in-a-century catastrophe, a relentless, unpredictable viral riptide that batters our bones, chokes our lungs, and threatens our livelihoods as well as our lives. Tens of millions of infected, more out of work, almost 200,000 Americans dead or dying. As the pandemic rends the fabric of our lives, it exposes our greatest national inequities. Black, brown, and Native people are dying at twice the rate of whites, and 42% of all COVID-19 fatalities are among vulnerable older people. But none of us is exempt from the devastation of the pandemic. As a physician, I'm seeing previously controlled chronic illnesses like hypertension and arthritis flare. Psychological vulnerabilities probed by pandemic fear and uncertainty are surfacing. Over half of all Americans and 68% of African Americans believe that the coronavirus has had a negative effect on their mental health. The government's suicide hotline reports 10 times as many calls as last year. Child abuse is increasing precipitously. Drug overdose deaths are up by 42%. We're struggling now with what Hippocrates, the founder of our modern medicine, speaking of individual patients, called a crisis, a time in the evolution of an illness when the symptoms of chronic dysfunction and disorder have reached a crescendo of inflammatory aggravation. Hippocrates observed that these crises could flame out in death or smolder as chronic illness, or, if the crisis was properly understood and its causes addressed, be transformed into what he called a healing crisis, a cleansing, detoxifying natural process that could give birth to a more integrated physical and emotional well-being. The challenge for us now is to recognize the hopeful promise of the present crisis and to embrace the potential for healing and transformation it offers to each of us and to our country. I know this transformation is possible. I've helped it to happen for 50 years in my own life, in my work as a psychiatrist with despairing patients, and as a leader of programs of population-wide healing in troubled and traumatized parts of our planet. I first discovered this population-wide healing possibility in 1999 in the Suwa-Reka region of Kosovo, where 80% of the homes were destroyed in the war between the Albanian rebels and the Serbian army, and 20% of high school students lost one or both parents. Suwa-Reka high school teachers were among the 600 Kosovars whom my Center for Mind-Body Medicine colleagues and I trained to use the self-care techniques, quiet concentrative and mindfulness meditations, and ancient active expressive techniques like shaking and dancing, guided imagery, biofeedback, and self-expression in words, drawings, and movement. The teachers learned to use these techniques to deal with their own stress and trauma, and then we showed them how to share what they'd learned with others, and like good teachers, they did. Early in our work together, the teachers asked me to see 9-year-old Mosey Berisha, the son of one of their colleagues who was murdered during the war, and their colleague's widow, Vjosa. 68 members of the Berisha family were slaughtered by the Serbs, most in the family's pizza parlor. Vjosa, who was wounded, held Mosey close underneath a pile of corpses in the back of a truck which was speeding them toward a mass grave. With Mosey in her arms and the truck careening ahead, she jumped. When I met with him, Mosey told me that he enjoyed playing football, by which he meant soccer, with his 2 cousins. At the end of our session, I brought the full weight of my authority as an American doctor to the prescription I wrote in large block letters and ceremoniously signed. "Play football with your cousins every day," it read. I was telling Mosey what I myself was learning, that in spite of terrible trauma, there was hope for change and healing, that he could make it happen, and that in fact he already knew what the first step was, playing football, and he was taking it. Vjosa was amazed by the changes that Mosey made. Before our meeting, he had played football only with his cousins. Now many other boys were included. He had returned to school and was speaking in class. When a friend who'd been in the same training as the teacher suggested Vjosa meet with me, she agreed. Grief seems to collapse and numb Vjosa. She nods hello with burdened effort, but seems unable to speak. I look, as I did with Mosey, for that place of hope where I can meet her, for what Vjosa can do to help and heal herself. After a while, my eyes find her friend. What was most helpful to you in our training? I ask. The soft belly breathing, the friend says. It quiets my thoughts and makes it easier for me to forget terrible things. And the yoga, it makes me feel alive again. Could your friend teach us both? I ask Vjosa. She nods, and we begin, breathing slowly and deeply in through our nose and out through our mouth, as Vjosa's friend learned from us. And you can do it too, while you're watching me. And then together we stretched for a few minutes. Afterward, Vjosa lifts her head, and just now, for the first time, she seems to see me. Would you be willing to do these every day with your friend, I ask. Yes, says Vjosa, speaking to me for the first time, moving me to tears. A few months later, the teachers tell me that Vjosa is practicing the breathing and yoga daily and that she's taken a job in a factory. A year later, Vjosa travels to The Hague to testify in the war crimes trial of the Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic. Struck dumb by unimaginable trauma, she's finding a voice to confront a ruthless dictator and a mission to bring justice to loved ones he has murdered. Meanwhile, the Suareka teachers are bringing the Center for Mind-Body Medicine model to all 1,000 students in their school. More than 85% of the kids who begin the small groups the teachers are leading with diagnosable post-traumatic stress disorder and the 11-week-long program no longer qualifying for the diagnosis. And the gains will hold at follow-up. The results are a stunning affirmation of the trauma-healing power of self-care and a landmark. This is the first ever randomized controlled trial of any intervention with war-traumatized children. Perhaps even more important, the study suggests that this healing approach can be brought to whole populations by large numbers of teachers and other community members, as well as mental health professionals. This is proving true in Kosovo, where the model is now available 20 years later to 2 million people. In Gaza, where the 1,000 we have trained have served 270,000 children and adults. In the largest division of the U.S. Veterans Administration, and in the U.S.'s 6th largest school system. Now, in the midst of the pandemic, it is time for each of us to consider living according to the principles and practices of this model, and for all of us to embrace our national healing crisis and the transformation it can bring. Football, soft belly breathing, and yoga jump-started Mosey and Vjosa's healing. Meditation is doing the same for many Americans. Millions are now enjoying meditative practices that are antidotes to pandemic-induced anxiety, agitation, and sleeplessness. The crisis is also inspiring many others to become more aware and mindful. Absent luxuries no longer seem essential, and routine activities, preparing and eating meals, reorganizing closets, watering plants, and walking by trees feel newly satisfying. Pandemic-induced isolation has exacerbated emotional distress and physical illness, but it's also made millions of us more appreciative of human connection. FaceTime calls and Zoom get-togethers with family and friends have become daily staples. Parents, overwhelmed by nonstop childcare, have also discovered new ways of deepening connection to their children. My goddaughter, recovering the playfulness and creativity of her own early childhood, is now sharing her delight with her 3 young kids. She sends me pictures of her 4-year-old making toys, planting seeds, and later harvesting cucumbers and tomatoes. Large numbers of us who claim we're not group people are filling classes in dance and cooking, knitting and finance, and enjoying new friends as well as new knowledge. Our challenge now is to continue to pay attention to what our ongoing healing crisis is teaching us and to act on what we are learning. Here's how. Keep on taking the small steps of self-awareness and self-care that are already moving you forward. They may lead to great and enduring change. Cultivate a meditative mind to quiet anxiety and agitation, promote reflection over reaction, and help ensure long-term physical and psychological well-being. Commit your loving attention to preserving the natural and material world which sustains us all. Continue to deepen your engagement with the people in your life. Celebrate your growing understanding that we are all connected to and responsible for one another. And remember that though it is challenging and painful, this is a healing crisis. The transformation is bringing can be your new reality. It is your birthright. Thank you all for being with me while I share these possibilities for transformation with you.